The smell of fresh, warm cinnamon rolls on a cool winter morning is amazing. These are so fluffy and have the perfect texture. You just have to try these. The first thing we have to do is bloom our yeast in 2 cups of warm milk. Add half a cup of granulated sugar, which is going to dissolve in the milk, and half a cup of unsalted melted butter for an enriched dough. Now stir it around to make sure that the sugar and butter are incorporated into the milk, and then add a packet of yeast. Stir it again to make sure that the yeast particles are completely hydrated, and then leave it for 10 minutes in a warm place in your kitchen. Now to this, we're going to add 4 cups of all-purpose flour. Mix it together well until it's not too lumpy. You should be left with a kind of wet dough. Once you're happy, cover it with cling film and let it rise for at least an hour in a warm part of your kitchen. Since this was my first time making a dough, I was a bit concerned about the growth, so I actually left it in my preheating oven for a bit and it rose quite well. While your dough is rising, let's make the filling. This consists of 3/4 of a cup of very softened butter, 3/4 of a cup of light brown sugar, and 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. I think that these measurements are perfect because it makes just the right amount of filling. To mix it together, just keep mashing it with your fork and do not do what I just did there. Let's pretend you never saw that. Okay, so after 1 to 2 hours, your dough should be almost double in size. To this, we're going to add the last cup of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and 2 teaspoons of kosher salt to enhance the flavor. Now take your time to bring this dough together. It might be pretty dry at first, but mix it as best as you can because there's plenty of moisture in this dough. You don't have to mix it quite as much as I did, but I mixed it quite well in the bowl and then I didn't actually have to knead it as much. As you can probably tell in this part, I was clueless. I had no idea how to knead dough. So I tried to punch it a bit and roll it over itself, and that seemed to work, so it was all good. Just make sure that you work every part of the dough. Also, an important tip is to keep the bench flour to a minimum when working with your dough. I actually ended up not using any in this step because my dough was surprisingly perfect. The only time you should be using flour is if your dough is sticking to your work surface or your hands. Knead it for about 10 minutes until it's smooth and it bounces back when you push your finger into it. Then I added a little bit of extra flour to prevent my dough from sticking to the board and began to poke my fingers into the dough to spread and stretch it. We want to get it into that rectangular shape as early as possible. Because this is such a good, enriched dough and we kneaded it so well, it should stretch without tearing. You might want to stretch your dough into a thinner, larger rectangle than mine for more layers of your cinnamon rolls. Once you've molded your dough into the right shape, it's time to spread the filling. I plopped mine down in sections so that it's easier to spread. For me, this was one of the most satisfying parts because it was so smooth and buttery. Make sure to spread the filling evenly all the way to the edges so that you'll be able to taste it in every bite. Now it's time for rolling! Come on, dough. You can do it! Sorry, it just looks like I'm encouraging the dough to roll. As you can see, just gently push your dough along. Take your time with this to make it as even and tight as possible, and then use the weight of the roll to press close the seam. I feel like my roll was kind of fat, so I just rolled it around a bit to gradually stretch it out. Before we move on to cutting, prepare your cake tins by buttering them or fitting them with parchment paper. One of the most famous cinnamon roll hacks is to use dental floss to cut the rolls. Whereas a knife flattens the roll while cutting, dental floss cuts them evenly from outside to in. Don't worry if your end ones are a bit chubby like mine. Don't give up, guys. Plenty of unpredictable things go wrong while baking, but you can overcome it. Work around it. I started to get a bit worried because after cutting my first 2 rolls, they didn't really look like rolls. But then I kept going and figured out that the middle rolls were fine. For the end parts, I just wasn't satisfied, so I reopened them and rolled them back up, and that fixed them. Now you can place your rolls in your prepared tins, and if you have any extras that you don't want to bake right now, you can store them in the freezer for up to 3 months. Now you can finally bake them after all that hard work. Psych! Sorry guys, but now you have to let them proof for 35 to 45 minutes. Just cover them with a kitchen towel and leave them in a warm place in your kitchen. This is the final rise before they go in the oven, but it's going to give you those perfectly fluffy rolls, so don't skip this step. Also, don't forget to preheat your oven to 175 degrees Celsius 10 minutes before they finish proofing. Once your rolls have expanded by up to half of their original size, now you can place them in the oven for 25 to 30 minutes. Keep an eye on them because the outer ones cook a little bit faster, so just make sure that the center one is cooked. Also, one of my cake tins was smaller, so I only fit 4 cinnamon rolls in it, and it actually baked faster than the other one, so make sure that they don't burn. I'm good. I'm not good. Stay safe from that evil oven, guys. I've learned from experience. Now we're going to make a beautiful cream cheese frosting. Add 15 grams of room temperature cream cheese to 2 tablespoons of melted butter. The cream cheese gives the perfect tanginess and I can't speak anymore. The cream cheese gives the perfect tanginess and cuts the sweetness a little bit. To this, add 4 tablespoons of milk and a teaspoon of vanilla extract for flavor. Cream these together very well until there are no lumps, and then you can gradually add 1 cup of powdered sugar. Mine was too runny, so I had to add a bit more powdered sugar. Once you take your buns out of the oven, leave them to cool for at least 10 minutes before glazing them, otherwise all the glaze is just going to melt. And now you're finally done! I cannot even tell you how good these smell. You just have to try them. Like, it's a must. And they taste so good. The sugar in the filling almost caramelized, which was one of the best things that could have happened. And they're so fluffy and perfect. I'm so glad I made these, and I hope you guys make them too.